If you're not aware, Next Fest is an event Steam puts on where you can try a bunch of game demos completely for free. I searched through tons of games this past week to find some roguelites that I wanted to try. Here are my quick impressions from all of these games, and I'll rate them all as either games that I'm sold on and plan to buy, games I will wishlist and keep watching, and finally, games that I'm not interested in and don't want to see more of. So let's get into it. The first game I played during Next Fest was Nordhold. It's a tower defense roguelite where you defend your castle from waves of enemies. You place your towers on this growing hex grid map that expands one large area every wave. Like any good tower defense game, it has different tower types, different enemy types that counter each other. You can unlock spells you can use to fight enemies off as well. And it's a progression heavy game where you build up your castle across runs. I liked this demo for Nordhold, but it didn't wow me. I like the tower so far, I like the enemy variety, and I like the upgrade system where you can upgrade your towers over time or with extra resources. At the same time though, it felt very similar to Rogue Tower for me, and it didn't really seem to have any huge genre-defining new features like Ember Ward does, for example. Basically, it had no special hook. I'm also concerned that, similar to Rogue Tower, the heavy vertical progression might cause some pacing problems for me. So definitely wishlisting and following this game, but I'm not quite sold on it yet. Next, I played the Monster Train 2 demo, which technically released a couple days before Next Fest. This game definitely feels like a Monster Train sequel, and really, it has that same core gameplay as the first Monster Train. If you've never played it, it's a card game roguelite with a focus on units, standardizing cards, and defeating waves of enemies attacking your train. You also have a powerful hero unit and can draft cards across 2 different clans. Honestly, I was sold on Monster Train 2 the second they announced it, but the demo did further solidify that choice. Even if it was just more Monster Train, I would love that, but they're clearly trying to explore new mechanics, new card types, an overall new feel with different clans, enemies, and status effects they're focusing on. For example, things like room effects that affect one level of your train are new, or powerful unit abilities that have turn-based cooldowns. All of these things felt fresh compared to the first game, but also making the story elements a lot more explicit. So, as a whole, all great things for me, and I'm super excited to see what they do with this game when they release it. Knightica is an auto-battler roguelite with a focus on positioning and upgrading your units. Before each fight, you draft units from a unit shop and place them onto a grid area. You then work on upgrading them by buying more copies, using spells and equipment on them to buff them, and arranging your unit placement to allow for certain synergies, like units that buff all nearby allies, giving them more attack damage. You can also select different starting classes that each have different passive effects and unique units. I think Knightika's auto-battler core clearly draws on more standard PvP auto-battlers with how the unit drafting works, and it definitely works well here. The gameplay loop is familiar, but fun. I liked the unit variety and how those synergies worked. I liked rearranging units, contemplating when to upgrade, what units to focus on, things like that. And because of all of that, this game definitely sold me. I do still have some concerns, mostly around how deep these synergies go, how good that unit variety will be, things like that just require more than a demo to fully see. But for now, I'm planning on buying Knightica when it comes out. Then I played Northwind, which is a card game roguelite that shifts around the standard attack and block mechanics. At the core, you counter enemy attacks mostly by just attacking back, and it becomes a tug-of-war type system where only the winner deals attack damage. For example, if the enemy is attacking you with 5 damage, if you deal 20 damage back that turn, you actually take no damage and instead deal 15. The game, of course, also explores mechanics outside of that, like direct damage, occasional enemy shielding, and effects that vary depending on who wins that tug-of-war. It has a fun character leveling system within each fight as well, and because of that tug of war, you try to balance attack and energy as opposed to attack and block. And that's because most of your energy comes from drawing energy cards as opposed to automatically on each turn. I love seeing developers trying to do something new in the deck builder card game roguelite space, which is a genre that's honestly increasingly saturated with time. And I think Northwind mostly succeeds there. At the same time though, it just felt like something was missing. I think part of that is the game just feels unpolished in areas like the overworld, which feel a little barren, or some card effects can be a little confusing at times. And while I had some fun combos and synergies, I didn't feel like I was able to create a satisfying build or deck during my limited playtime. I'm just not quite sold yet, but I'll definitely be wishlisting and following this game. As We Descend is a unique hybrid of CRPG, deck building, and tactical elements. It had some funny dialogue and some actual background and story for this dark setting. And it lets you make some funny choices at times, like refusing to start a run, leading you to being executed. The combat revolves around managing units you draft in a simplified battlefield where you and the enemy have 2 lanes each that you move your units between. During the fight, you can use cards that do that moving, defend your units, and attack enemies. I quite like what I've seen so far from this game. It's a great setting and aesthetic, and it's a fun fusion of all these different genre elements. Because of that, I want to see more of this game. But I also have some specific concerns about things that might ruin the game long term. First, the balance definitely feels off right now, for certain encounters, especially in an unfun way. Second, I worry the CRPG elements will get repetitive too quickly, and they're a pretty sizable percentage of that playtime. I'm going to put this game in that wishlist and follow category because I just want to see how those things pan out before I actually buy it. An Amazing Wizard is a 2D platformer roguelite whose biggest pitch is its unique spell crafting mechanics. You can find 2 basic spells along the way, and you can also collect 3 more powerful, more limited abilities as well. These more powerful spells can be merged together to create more powerful effects and combo spells. That's the unique spellcrafting mechanic. These more powerful spells require energy that's gained from basic attacks and often have a short cooldown as well. I wanted to try this game for those core ideas, and I think it does it well. Merging spells was fun, and I enjoyed the spell variety that I've seen so far. For those reasons, An Amazing Wizard is a wishlist and follow. At the same time, this game feels somewhat unpolished and amateurish. As some examples, the game would intermittently not recognize my controller. Some controls, movement, and menu navigation felt off, like the bouncing slimes, for example, or navigating dialogue being inconsistent. More actual gameplay-wise, a lot of these active spells had like a 1-second cooldown, which prevented me from spamming them in an unfun way. I also realized later that AI was used for some game marketing material per the Steam page. So, interesting enough premise and initial gameplay loop, but it has a decent amount of small to medium-sized issues that I want to see ironed out for me personally before I actually buy it myself. Afterblast is a promising new co-op FPS roguelite that I tried as well. You clear rooms of enemies, collect various guns, active abilities, and passive abilities along the way. You're always getting a standard dodge and a non-standard grappling hook for your moveset. In addition to grappling off walls and ceilings, enemies will occasionally become vulnerable to your grapple as you lower their health, and if you grapple to them during that period, you insta-kill them and make them drop shield and ammo. I was really hoping to enjoy this game more than I actually did. It was honestly just fine, but outside of co-op, it's just hard for me to think of a good reason to play Afterblast over, say, Deadlink or Battle Shapers, which both felt similar in certain ways. The core elements are good enough. Good FPS gameplay, the weapons feel distinct, though limited in number, and the game has seemingly impactful build crafting, but the grappling hook fell really flat for me, which is pretty crucial in a wannabe movement shooter. It can miss easily, hooking a wall or sealing behind enemies. It's weird if an enemy dies as you hook them, sometimes stopping you mid-air, and sometimes just sending you flying past the enemy anyways. And when it does work, it has a weird slow bounce back animation, which just felt unsatisfying to me. And there's some other things too, like being able to easily miss rewards and not really enjoying the first boss. So I'm not going to put this game in the not interesting category because I think it does the core gameplay well enough, but I need to see something new in this game to get me to actually consider buying it. The King is Watching is harder to describe with the simple genre title. You have a city building core where you place tiles that collect various resources and summon units to defend your castle. However, while you can place a lot of tiles, only tiles with your active gaze or selector over them are active. You can expand this selector with time and rotate it as needed. You're regularly attacked with waves of enemies that can only be defeated by summoning units with specific buildings and resources, or a couple other defense techniques as well, like spells. This demo was great so far. It felt fresh and it felt fun. I liked the core loop managing these tiles. I liked balancing resource gain with building up an army to defend the castle, with some of the economic elements like upgrading gaze size, which is beneficial in the long term. This game also already has some nice randomization elements around randomized buildings or tiles, artifacts, and enemy waves. There are definitely some quirks with how the UI and controls work that confused me at first, but ultimately, it's not that complicated. I'm definitely sold on this game. I'm ready to sink my teeth into it and see how deep it actually is, see how far I can go. Aethermancer is a turn-based monster taming roguelite. You create a team of 3 monsters that have different affinities across 4 elements. During your fights, you build up elemental ether each turn, and with basic attacks, you can then use for more powerful abilities. There are classic elemental counter types, as well as unique status effects, staggering enemies, and cross-monster synergies in the form of healing, shielding, and sidekick combo attacks. You can also capture or unlock enemy monsters, which allows you to find them on future runs. Aethermancer was great. The game obviously is inspired by Pokemon games and is from the same developers that did Monster Sanctuary. I found the fights themselves to be enjoyable, and I can already see a lot of potential depth and variety across runs. They've also thought through those roguelite elements and randomization with how you draft the monsters you get, the abilities from leveling, things like that. Negatives-wise, this game feels designed for controller first, and while you can use your keyboard, you can't actually use your mouse to click on things like menus or abilities. That's definitely something that should be added to the game or fixed if it's a bug. Also, the predicted damage from attacks is often wrong, I think because of percent chance effects, which I guess makes sense, but it also just felt a little weird. But those things definitely aren't deal breakers, and I'm excited to play this game when it comes out. I'm definitely sold on it. The final game I played was another farm roguelike, Rebirth. In this game, you control a plot of land where you chop wood, mine, fish, and of course, farm as well. You have some crafting trees as well, and you can create buildings to do that crafting. Along the way, your goal is to use what you find to create high value outputs like crops or craft items that can be sold off to pay rent. You get randomized modifiers that act as passive buffs or short-term curses. Unfortunately, I just don't think this game is for me. I was never that into games like Stardew Valley, which clearly inspired this game, so a large part of that was just a genre thing for me, but I wanted to try it anyways during Next Fest. I know that daily energy usage for tools is not a new concept, but I just didn't like the cadence of it here. I also didn't love how it felt like there were all these game systems, but then the objectives for winning were just selling things for money, as opposed to being incentivized to actually engage with those systems, like Against the Storm does, for example. It also seemed like every fun buff came with some corresponding debuff. And finally, some of the UI with navigating your inventory, crafting, things like that was all functional, but a little clunky or annoying. Despite listing a couple negatives, I actually think another farm roguelike, Rebirth, is a decent game if you want that farming loop. But for me, I was looking for a more novel twist to draw me into farming games, and I didn't find that. So every extra barrier in this game, or every small annoyance, felt like a fatal flaw, even though in reality, they aren't. So let's wrap up this video with my favorites and some closing thoughts. There are a lot of games that I wishlisted, but there were 4 clear winners for me. They were Monster Train 2, Knightica, The King is Watching, and Aethermancer. There's some good genre variety there as well, which is quite nice. Out of all of those, I'm definitely most excited for Monster Train 2. The first Monster Train is one of my favorite roguelites, so I'm really excited to play around with all these elements that I've seen so far just in the demo. I think Knightica could also be an incredibly solid roguelite auto-battler as well, and I'm excited to see how this Pokemon-style monster taming roguelite shapes out with Aethermancer. Finally, I think The King is Watching is just unique in a satisfying way. I like the strategy elements I saw, and want to play around with those more. So as a whole, this Next Fest gave me a good sampling of upcoming games to add to my existing list of ones I'm already excited for. Some other straight thoughts for Next Fest. I originally picked out 20 games or so that looked interesting, but I only had time for these 10. I sifted through quite a large number of games on that first day especially, as well as a lot of demos were sent to me by developers and publishers before Next Fest even started. I really love that Next Fest allows you to see all these very small and just quirky, unique indie games that are usually lost among all the games that come out. It's always fun to see what's out there and see how people are trying out new things, even if they don't always work out perfectly. There's also a lot more explicit use of AI compared to Next Fest last year, which I guess shouldn't be that surprising. But there were a couple games that caught my interest, which I later dropped because of that, including one that just opened with a very off-putting AI cutscene. Anyways, let me know in the comments if you tried any fun games during this Next Fest, especially ones that I missed and would recommend for me to follow. Huge shout out to all of our channel members for helping support the channel. Please like this video to help me out in the algorithm, and thanks for watching.